training for the new EVV Visits screen. You'll see when you come into EVV Visits that it will load the visits every time you come into the screen. So anytime you want to refresh your view, you can just come out of EVV and go back in and it will load again. What you'll see when you come into the screen, the from date and to date are going to default to today. So if you want to look at a wider range of dates, you can change the date up there so you can see more dates. Also, there is a program pull down here. If you want to look at a different program or office, or narrow it down to just one office, you can do that right there and select one office. So within this screen, what you'll see is the total number of visits for today, if you've got one day selected there. It's going to show you the patient name, employee name, status, date, the scheduled time for the visit, and this will change to the actual time once the visit is completed. And then it'll show you how much time was scheduled for the visit, and then the actual, how much time actually transpired for the visit. So, and then right after those, you'll see a column that tells you how much over or under the visit actually was compared to the scheduled. So for example, here's one that was scheduled for 2 hours and 45 minutes. It actually was 2 hours and 23 minutes when the aide did it in person using the app. So the aide was 22 minutes under the amount of time that was supposed to be done on the visit. So that's kind of what you can see here. To very quickly see the status of the visit, you will use the icons over to the very left, and there's a key for those icons down at the bottom. So you have scheduled visits with a blue clock, in progress with a progress bar that's yellow, and completed with a green check mark. And then we'll get into the other statuses as they come up. I'll talk about those in just a minute. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to click on the status bar to organize everything by status so we can kind of talk about that. So I can click on that and I'll see which ones are in progress up at the top. I will see the ones that are locked up below that. And then I can scroll down and see the ones that are scheduled underneath that. So this is kind of useful for watching the visits happen over the course of a day. You'll kind of see this happen, and the visits will go into progress when the aide starts the visit in the field, and then it will lock up when the aide completes the visit. As I said, once a visit is locked and complete, you're going to see the actual time under time rather than the scheduled time. So when the visits are in progress, you'll see the time that they started the visit here. If the current time is after the time they were supposed to have completed the visit, you may want to call them and ask them if they were able to complete the visit and figure out what's going on. If the visit was completed, but they for some reason forgot to clock out, then they're going to need to let you know what time they completed the visit. When that happens, you can click on it here, and you will see a finish button up at the top. So you can click on that, and what you'll do then is you'll put the EVV start actually was with the mobile app, so we'll put mobile here. And the EVV end, because you're doing it manually, you're putting it in manually, the aide forgot to do it, you would put manual here, okay? And then down here at the bottom, anytime you use a manual technology to do something, you have to put a change reason. So in this case, it was caregiver error and forgot to log out, or clock out rather, let me put clock out, okay? And then what we'll do from there is go ahead and click on the add button here. And then you'll see that that visit went ahead and went to completed there. So all that information will flow through to the EVV aggregator. So that's how you kind of can put in the information that the aide gives you by phone. Also, if there is a scheduled visit and they tell you the start time on that visit because they go out and they're not able to use the app for whatever reason, you would use the same process. The only difference is if you're doing it on a scheduled visit, the button is going to say start instead of finish because it's going to record your start time. So you'll just record the start time and save it, and then when they tell you what time they finish, you will put that in. When the aide calls you from the patient phone number, you can actually put that in as a telephony reason down at the bottom, or I'm sorry, over at the left, where you put the reason next to the time. You can put it as telephony if they call you from the patient phone number. If they are putting their time in on the app, then the reason will be mobile. And if neither one of those is true and they're just telling you from their phone, then we're going to do manual because that actually does not qualify as EVV. So you would put manual. Either way, you're going to have to put the reason down at the bottom and put a memo on it so that it's clear why you're having to do that. So that will allow you to complete up your visits in the system. One of the other things I want to talk about is flagging. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and expand out the number of days that I look at so that we can talk about that. And I'm going to check on Evv status here. It takes a second for the Evv status to come up, so give it a moment. And then you'll see if you scroll down and move the cursor over, you're going to see the Evv status. To look at this, I like to organize it by patient so that all the patient visits are together. And this is something that you may want to do anyway because this will allow you to see which aides are not using the app, and that will enable you to offer them additional training. So this is what you want to see on aides that are using the app. You want to see Evv verified, and you're also seeing this particular aide did the visits within the minutes allocated. So this is kind of perfect right here. This is kind of what we want to see. This is what we're hoping for, is that the aide completes all their visits on the app, it's Evv verified that they were at the patient home, and the minutes are within the allocation for rounding. So this is kind of a perfect scenario here. So if we scroll down, I want to show you some flagged ones. So here there are visits to one particular patient, and 2 of them are flagged. And it says that they started 12 miles away. One of the reasons this can happen is that the address for the patient under the referrals area can be inaccurate, or it can throw off the GPS locator. So one of the things we found that can throw it off, if you have an apartment number listed on the address line for the patient in the referral area, that can actually throw off the GPS locator. So what you'll want to do is put that apartment number under the directions tab in the referral instead. That way we won't have to worry about the apartment interfering with the locator. If there's not an apartment number, then what I'm recommending is that you go ahead and Google the address to the patient's home and check and make sure that it resolves on Google. Because if it does not, then that's a good indicator that you may not have an accurate address for the patient. So anytime you see flagging, and particularly where there's flagging on every visit for a patient, that is an indicator that something is wrong with the patient's address, and you'll need to correct that under the referral area for the patient. And that will correct as soon as you fix the address under the referral for the patient. When you come back in here, you'll see it listed as Evv verified if you fix the problem on the patient's address. Now, sometimes you'll see something different where there are several EVV verified visits for a patient, and these are all verified, so they're fine, but maybe one of the visits to the patient is flagged. If that is the case, what that means, since there are visits that are EVV verified, the patient's address is accurate. If there's only one that's flagged, that means that the aide actually started or finished the visit away from the patient home. They probably did it on the way to the patient home or somewhere else. So that is what we're looking for with the flagging. In some cases, like I said, we may have to correct the patient address if we're seeing multiple visits flagged like this, and there's none that are actually verified. But if there are visits that are verified for that patient, that means that the aide is starting or finishing the visit away from the patient home. Once we have all your patients so that they're not flagged, we will be able to lock it down so that the aide will not be able to start away from the patient home. But for right now, until we get all of your patient addresses resolved, we want to make sure that the aide can still use the app. So in this case, we need to correct the patient address and make sure it's working before we lock down the app to only allow the aide to start the visit at the patient home. Another thing you can do up at the top of the screen is you can look at the narrow down just the visits by the status. So for example, if I only wanted to see my in progress visits, I can just click in progress and I could see all of those. If I only want to see the ones that are completed, I can pull down and click on completed. Completed includes flagged, so you can see the flagged ones here as well. Once you pull up a screen with a certain status, you can then organize it however you want. If you want to organize it by time, you can click on time. If you want to organize it by Evv status, you can. If you want to organize it by employee, you click on that. So you can organize it within any of the statuses as well. So as I mentioned, what I recommend in terms of watching your visits day to day is that you just look at all the statuses and organize it probably by time, just so you can kind of look at the times and see what's happening as it happens out in the field. And as I mentioned, all you have to do to refresh it is to click on anywhere else on the menu in Barnestorm and then come back to EVV visits. It will load and refresh the information that's out in the field. Another thing you're going to want to look at over the course of a few days, I would also check and organize it by aide. So you would click on employee to do that. And that's going to give you a sense of which aides are using the app and which ones are not. So if one aide has visits scheduled over the course of days and all of their visits still show as scheduled, that means they're not using the app. So we may need to go ahead and get that aide to come back in the office and get some training so that we can make sure that they're using the app. If I have an aide that has visits over the course of days that are still showing in progress, that means that that aide is forgetting to finish the visit within the app at the patient home. So we need to remind them that they're going to have to go ahead and click on finish as they're leaving the patient home to complete that visit and send the time back in. So those are a couple of issues that you're going to want to address, and those are easiest to address, like I said, when you're looking at a time frame over the course of several days so that you can see what the trend is. And it's the same thing with the Evv flagging, as I mentioned. We talked about that just a second ago, where visits are flagged as being away from the home, and when it applies to the patient address issue and when it does not. We talked about that just a moment ago. So those are some of the things you're going to want to recognize. Another thing that I would point out that you might glean from looking at visits over time is which aides are doing an exceptional job. Whenever you see, like I said, this particular group is one aide, and this aide is doing a fantastic job. She has completed every single visit. All of her visits are within the allocated rounding time. All of them were verified to be at the patient home. So this particular aide is doing really, really well. So if you have to do additional training for other aides, this person might be one that I would call in as someone who could talk to the other aides about what their process is and what's working for them. Okay. Another thing I'll show you, here's another aide who's doing a fantastic job right here, and you can see she's hitting all of her visits, she's completing them all, they're all verified that she's at the patient home, they're all within the time that's committed for rounding. There are a couple of flags on here, and the reason these are flagged, that is really just for you in the office because there are incomplete tasks. So this is not to ding the aide at all, but let's have a look and see what task might not be finished. So if we look at the tasks in here, we can see that the change of lemons was not completed because the patient refused. So this particular flagging is just for you to know that you may want to change linens onto one of the later visits for the week. You can do that on the aide schedule in the comment area. So this is not a flagging that relates to anything that the aide has done wrong. It's only a flagging that relates to making sure that you get the task done for the patient. Another thing that you may want to use in terms of going back to the aide schedule, and let me find a visit that will apply. So some of the visits here, we have several visits to a patient where the aide went under the allocated time. In this case, where we have the aide under kind of consistently for one patient, you may need to go to the aide schedule and extend some of the future visits within the month so that you meet your authorized hours for the month because the aide is going under. So this is another thing you may want to keep an eye on and check. Anytime you see a visit that looks wrong or is only 1 minute long, like this one right here is only 1 minute. The aide probably erroneously did this. She was at the home, but the visit was only 1 minute long. So this is probably an error. And if you want to get rid of that one, you can do so by clicking the remove button up at the top. For any visit that actually was completed, you can click on it and click on the print button, and that will bring up the assessment so that you can actually see the visit. And then, like I mentioned, for any visit that you need to modify, whether it's because the aide forgot to clock out, or if they're calling in their start or end time, you're going to use this button up here. Like I said, this button will show finish if they've already clocked in their start time. If they have not clocked in their start time, it is going to show start, so that you will put the start on there. Otherwise, if the visit is already completed, that button will show as an edit button so that you can edit it if needed. Normally, if the visit is EVV verified, you are not going to need to do edit. And be sure that if the visit is completed in the app, you leave the times the way they are, because those are going to be sent to the aggregator as they are. That's an important part of EVV, is that it sends the exact times that the visits were started and finished to the aggregator. So that should never be changed. Don't change the start times when the whole visit is EVV verified. The only time you'll change the times is if the aide is not able to put in their start or end time on the app. That's the only time you will change the times. And as I mentioned, to do that, you would click on a visit that was scheduled, you'll put in a start time, and if they've already started it in the app and they forgot to click on finish when they left, you can click on it and the button will be finished. You can put in the finish time and the reason. All of this information is also available in writing in our training materials for the EVV visit screen.